Please join us on our trip to Iceland in early March of 2018. The population of the entire country of Iceland is just over 334,000 people, which is about 10,000 less than the city of Bakersfield, California. We left home on March the 4th and landed at Keflavik International Airport early the next morning. Iceland is 8 time zones ahead of California. The airport is located about 45 minutes west of Iceland's capital, Reykjavik, where our hotel was located. It was a small, family-owned hotel with a distinct European flavor. Here is another photo of the hotel, which is located on a small lake. The following day, we met up with longtime friends from New Jersey, Dick and Janet, and their oldest daughter, Robin, at one of Iceland's most popular attractions, the Blue Lagoon. We had been warned that food in Iceland is very expensive, and that fact was certainly confirmed with our $233 lunch at the Blue Lagoon. There's a great deal of volcanic activity in Iceland, and soaking in geothermally heated baths is a big thing. Almost every small town has a public bath. The Blue Lagoon is a large man-made facility that draws thousands of tourists each day. Your ticket to the Blue Lagoon includes one free drink, which you get by walking up to a stand like this one. Heated water for the lagoon is provided by the adjacent geothermal plant. Water temperature averages right around 100 degrees. The air temperature, however, is considerably cooler. On our way back to the hotel that evening, Jenny and I spotted the only Costco in Iceland. With the exception of the signs and some of the merchandise, the store was very similar to those in the States. After our expensive lunch earlier in the day, we were glad to get a good old Costco hot dog for only 299 kronas, about $3. We were drawn to Costco several more times during our stay because it was by far the least expensive place to eat. One of Jenny's friends told us before we left to look for the grocery stores with the pig logo, as they were the cheapest places to shop. So that's what we did. Dick, Janet, and Robin were staying at an Airbnb near downtown Reykjavik. Each morning we met at their place, then headed out to see that day's attractions. That's them ahead of us. Our first stop was a place called Black Beach, so named for the fine-grained sand of volcanic origin. Many warnings were posted regarding the dangers of rogue waves and a strong undertow. Numerous large stone monoliths are located near the beach. Dick and Janet. These large basaltic formations attracted a lot of photographers. The mouth of a shallow cave. And this is the jagged interior roof of that cave. Here is one of the many Lutheran churches that dot the landscape of Iceland. Our next stop was to see the waterfalls of Skogafoss and Seljalandsfoss. Before we go much further, I should mention that I'm probably mispronouncing most of these Icelandic names. This trail of 527 steps led to the top of the falls at Skogafoss. Finally, after several rest stops, Dick, Jenny, and I made it to the top. These are the falls at Seljalandsfoss. In the summer, you can take this trail and walk behind the falls. Obviously not the case in the winter. On the way home that evening, Jenny and I pulled off the road to explore this area of bubbling thermal pots. Jenny warming her hands. On our way out to Carrad Crater the following morning, we passed this farm with Icelandic ponies. More about these unique horses later. This is Carrad Crater, the caldera of an extinct volcano. And the frozen lake inside the caldera. A close-up of the frozen surface. And another. This is the view from the rim of the crater. Robin. A large lake at Thingvellir National Park. There was no admission fee for the park. However, it cost 200 kronas to park and 200 kronas to use the water closet. In our time in Iceland, we did not see any roadside rest stops along the highways. By the time we got to Thingvellir, we all had to go pretty bad. You were asked to insert two 100 krona coins or a credit card into a slot which spit out a receipt. Then you scanned the receipt at the turnstile to gain entrance to the bathroom area. There was a guard posted to be sure no one jumped the turnstile. Quite a process just to take a pee. The views around the visitor center were quite impressive. Wonder how long that rock has been balanced there. On the road the following morning to visit the geyser hot springs area, where we would encounter boiling mud pots and the Skokor geyser, which spouts water into the air 100 feet every few minutes. Skokor geyser. The popularity of photographing from drones seems to be increasing. We saw them at Black Beach as well as at the geyser area. Skokor again. This is a fairly large thermal pond. We got a kick out of this sign near the pond. Waiting for Skokor to blast off. Later that day, we moved on to the spectacular falls at Gullfoss. By the way, if you haven't figured it out yet, Foss means falls. It was a cold and windy day, as were most of the days during our stay, but the views were certainly worth it. A frozen portion of the falls. That evening we decided to book a bus tour that would go in search of the Aurora Borealis. Seeing the northern lights was one of our primary goals in taking this trip. Spoiler alert, this is a photo of a photo in a museum. We never saw anything as dramatic as this. It was a small bus with about 25 passengers, then the driver took us back out near Thingvellir National Park where the lights of Reykjavik did not impact the night sky. Ginny and Robin were the first ones to spot the shimmering green lights, and the driver immediately pulled off the highway onto a dirt road. All of these photos were actually taken by the bus driver. Neither Ginny nor I had any luck photographing the phenomenon. Our hands quickly became almost useless as the temperatures were in the low 20s, and making camera adjustments in the dark without gloves became a most difficult task. After realizing that we weren't going to get any good pictures, we decided just to take in the lights and enjoy what our eyes were seeing. The white streaks that appear in some of these photos are headlights from cars passing on the highway. The next day, we decided to visit the Perlan Ice Museum in Reykjavik. The museum includes ice caves that are similar to the ones that occur naturally inside of some glaciers. This is a deep shaft in the ice cave. And these are stratigraphic layers of ice that represent many thousands of years. The dark lines are ash from volcanic eruptions that have taken place through time. This is a replica of a glacial pool. Architecturally, the dome of the museum is very impressive. Here, we're taking a break in the restaurant under the dome. Ginny wandered off to take a few pictures, but then she caught me stealing some of her ice cream. Outside of the dome is a 360-degree viewing deck that looks out over the city of Reykjavik. This is the famous church of Hallgrímur. Another church. One thing we noticed was the lack of single-family dwellings in the Reykjavik area. Almost all of the residential neighborhoods that we saw were apartment houses or condominiums. Those neighborhoods also were very European in appearance. We saw an unbelievable number of trucks and SUVs that were set up to go off-roading in the snow with huge tires and lift kits. The tires on this Jeep were exceptionally large. On Sunday, our friends were heading home to New Jersey, but before they left, Dick was kind enough to take Ginny and I out to the airport to turn in our rental car, then back into Reykjavik to pick up this camper van that we would travel in for the next 4 days. That afternoon, we headed north along the west coast of Iceland. We rented the Volkswagen van from a company called Cozy Campers. It was well equipped and suited our needs very well. We camped for the night in the small town of Bordalur. This hardy individual was going out for some exercise in his kayak in the early evening. According to the thermometer in our vehicle, it was about 31 degrees out and the sun was on its way down. Hardy may be too mild a word for this fellow. Our camp for the night. The interior lighting consisted of this string of LED lights. A little peculiar, but they got the job done. Breaking camp the next morning. And moving north into the hills. Once out of the Reykjavik area, one-lane bridges like this one were very common. Here's a sign letting you know that one is coming up. We came across many small farms with Icelandic ponies on them. These horses are a unique breed and have 5 natural gaits, whereas most equine breeds have only 2 or 3 natural gaits. They are raised primarily for recreational purposes, but they're also found on the menu at many restaurants in the country. Natural forage is hard to come by in the winter, so this farmer has 2 rolls of hay on his tractor to feed his animals. Once the horses saw breakfast coming, they lost interest in us and headed for the tractor. Warning! Road work ahead. The scenery for the next few days was breathtaking. This part of the country is called West Fjords, and the road winds its way around a seemingly endless number of peninsulas that extend out into the ocean. It seemed that a good-sized farm would be located at the end of each fjord. Some of these were dairies and some raised sheep, but we never saw any cows or sheep. A local told us that they keep the animals indoors at least through the winter. We saw no wildlife other than birds at all, and the only domesticated animals we saw were the ponies. From a distance, this sign was hard to read. I mentioned earlier that there were no roadside rest stops in Iceland, so we're guessing that enough people use this corral for their personal business that it prompted the landowner to post this sign. Very curious. A few photos of the gravel roads in this area. Many of the churches that we saw were set up in rather remote areas. You have to wonder where the congregation comes from on a Sunday morning. All the farms displayed stacks of rolled and bagged hay to feed their animals. Lunch break. A snowplow that we just passed. Frozen waterfalls like this were quite common in the region. This large truck was pulling a good-sized tank behind it, and he passed us at a rapid rate of speed. As you can see, there's still some residual ice on the road. Too fast for me in those conditions. Late in the day, we backtracked and returned to Bordelur to camp for a second night. A local fish processing plant had 2 pet seals in a tank next to their building. These guys were fun to watch. If you look closely, you can see the photographer's reflection in the seal's eye. Fueling up the next morning. Today we're heading to the Snæfellsnes Peninsula, another of the many one-lane bridges. It seems that some Icelanders believe in the existence of elves and trolls. Rock cairns like the one in this picture dot the landscape. According to legend, the Karens are night-dwelling trolls who were caught in the daylight and turned to stone. Here's Ginny, troll hunting with her trusty camera. She captures a photo of an extremely rare set of twin trolls. Another church in an isolated area. Vestiges of a former fishing trawler. Yet another church in an out-of-the-way location. We are entering the Snæfellsnes Peninsula area. This is the charming little town of Stykkishólmur on the north side of the peninsula. This nautical sculpture looked far better in person than in my photo. A fishing vessel heading home. The next are several views of the town. And another. The building in the foreground houses a church, a hospital, and a hotel. The one in the background is a modernistic church. And this is a close-up of that modernistic church. And this is another small north coast town called Grundarfjörður. Mount Kirkjufell, pictured here, attracts photographers from around the world to Grundarfjörður. That's a mouthful. Farther west on the Snæfellsnes Peninsula, we find Ólafsvík, a slightly larger town with a thriving fishing industry. Unloading the day's catch. Another frozen waterfall. On the south coast of the peninsula, we camp for the night at Snorrastadir. It is a working farm that has been slightly developed to attract travelers. As the evening was quite windy, we decided to set up camp in the lee of this large building. Getting ready for dinner. On our way back to Reykjavik the next day, we stopped in Borgarnes for some hot coffee and tea. When we entered the convenience store, snow flurries were just beginning. By the time we finished our drinks, it was really coming down. After about 40 minutes, the snow turned to rain, and the driving conditions improved dramatically. Here, we're about to enter a 3-kilometer tunnel built under an arm of the Atlantic Ocean. The proverbial light at the end of the tunnel. We spent our last night in Iceland back at the Kryunis Hotel. That evening, we drove around Reykjavik and took in some of the sights. This is a concert hall called the Harpa. The architecture is quite unique, and much of the glass on the exterior of the building reminds one of fish scales, which I'm guessing is the idea. This stylized version of a Viking ship is situated at the harbor. The next morning, we turned in our camper van and began the long trip home. This is a view of Greenland from the window of our plane. Thanks for viewing our slideshow. We hope you enjoyed it.